Alrighty guys, welcome to week 6, and this week we are going to talk about how to take JSON data and visualize it. Do something with it that makes it so us humans can visualize it a little more. This is called visualization, basically taking a lot of data and putting it in a way where we can visually see the data, like a graph or something like that. So if we take a look at the assignment, we're going to use this thing called, it's a P5 library. It's right here. We'll talk about it in a minute. This is going to help us with the drawing aspect of it. I'll show you all the different things that it can do, and you can figure out how you want to do it. And the JSON feed we're going to use, or at least I'm going to show in this demo, is over here at Open Notify. And the APIs here that it gives us is the current location of the International Space Station and the number of people in space. And this is the one I'm going to use. So these are actually currently the people at the station, which is kind of cool. And what we're going to give, or what we're going to use, is right here, this JSON file. If I open it up here, it actually formats it pretty well. And the reason why is because I came over here and I got this JSON formatter, which I would recommend you get. Just come over here to more tools, extensions. Come on down here, go to get more extensions, and then just type in JSON. This is the one I grabbed. These both basically do the exact same thing, so you can grab whatever one you want here. This may actually do something different, I don't know, but this is the first one I grabbed. Worked good, because if you don't have it, what it looks like is this. Just kind of gross, not as easy to read. So once it goes through and parses it, it makes it a lot easier to read it and to be able to easily navigate through what you want to navigate through. Okay, so that's going to be what we'll use here. That's going to be the JSON that we're going to use. Now we're going to use P5 to animate things and draw things and such. So, like usual, I'm going to create a new folder. I'll call it JSON Visual, I guess. Okay. That was weird. Whatever. So, anyways, there we go. Open up brackets here. File new. I don't want to spend forever doing this. So I'm just going to go grab doc type. Definitely shouldn't have to talk about what the doc type and all that such stuff is. I know Brackets has a plugin to do that. What it is, though, I don't know. I never really looked it up. So I'll just call it index. Go save it in JSON Visual. Boom. Okay. Now, all of the coding I'm just going to do in here. I'm not going to do any external files or anything. I'm just going to keep it all in here. So I'm going to say like JSON International Space Station, and then we'll just get rid of this. Okay. So because this is a library, we need to download it so we can use it. So we got to come here, we got to hit download. It's just like jQuery type stuff. So I want the single file, the P5 min. I'm going to grab that. Okay, so JSON visuals, save it in there. Okay, so now we have that library. It is in the folder. So there it is right there. So let's get it embedded. Okay. Now, the way this works, I mean, we'll go over it, but if you ever want to get an idea of what this can do, you can come over here to reference. Like most of these have reference things, and you can come down here and it'll just tell you all the different things it can do. Like there's settings for color, there's creating and reading color. You can draw different shapes. You can do a little bit of 3D model stuff, 3D primitives, preload, setup, draw. These are the three functions we're going to use. There's no loops and loop and push and pop. I mean, there's a bunch of different things. This width and height. I mean, these are kind of like built-in commands that this can do. So really, if you end up liking this, it does help you to visualize this data, which is nice. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff with this. Then you can actually get into like 3D stuff, and I mean, there's just a lot it can do. Okay, so we're only going to we're just going to kind of skim the surface here. But if you're wondering if this can do something, chances are it's going to be in here if it can. All right, so now that we got it in, we'll just start up the script here. I'm going to throw this in the body. And I mean, basically, we're going to be creating all of the content using this library here. Okay, so first thing I want to do here is load in that JSON data. So I'm going to set up a global variable. Now, the reason why I'm setting up a global variable, because I want this this variable data, I want this to be used in any function that we set up. Okay, so I'm going to create a function. This preload function is a P5 function that it expects. And I'm going to say data is going to be equal to load JSON. And what I'm going to load is that JSON file right here. Okay, now if we look at it, it has the key value pairs of number and the value of 6, and then it has another key here, and then it has the array with a bunch of other stuff. So inside of people, it then has another array with key value pairs of craft and IS. So they're all ISS, so International Space Station. But the ones that I'm but the ones I'm interested in are the names. So this is the JSON data I'm going to work with. If you find something else that you want to use, that's fine. But if you want to go with this, it doesn't really matter to me what you use. But this is going to be what I'm going to use for this little project here that I'm going to show you how to do. So this is what I want. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to load that JSON file. Now we run it here. Okay, remember we can debug here. Now we talked about last week or whatever the last assignment, that sometimes you have to pad this stuff, and we'll get there when we need to, but for now let's just do that, because if you pad it, if you got cross sites, you get all kinds of different issues that you may run into, and that's okay. Now the way P5 works is it has a setup function and it has a draw function. The setup is just what it sounds like. You get all your stuff set up in here, and then you draw in here. Now the big difference here is this runs once. Okay, and the way P5 works is this function draw runs as a loop, basically. So everything you put inside a draw is going to be ran over and over and over again a bunch of times per second. And you got to keep that in mind as you start putting in these commands and such. Okay. So the first P5 command here that I'm going to do is create canvas. It's just like if you've done anything of HTML5 canvas, it's the same thing. And I'm going to have this be 500 by 300. So 500 is the width, 300 is the height. Okay, and I'm going to set the background. This is the background color. I can say these are all RGB values, which is interesting. So I could go 0, 0, 0. Or if all three of these numbers are the same, I can just put it in once. Right, so there's my canvas. Just going to bring it over here. Okay, so remember, most of these commands we're going to be doing here are P5 commands. They're not like native JavaScript commands. These are P5 things that we can use because we're embedding the library here. Right, the next thing I'm going to do is you have stroke and fill values. It's just like you would think they are in like Photoshop. or Illustrator. Stroke is the line around an object. Fill is the color that fills the object, right? So I want all of because my canvas here is black, I want the fill of all my objects to be white. So I can say 255 once, and that'll go 255 3 times, or I think you can do it this way too. Okay, now I haven't drawn anything, so we can't really see it, but we will here in a minute. So let's see here. The first thing I'm going to do then is I'm going to set up a loop that's going to go through their names. And I just want to list on the page everyone that's in the space station. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter a couple times here. So I'm going to say for I equals 0. Okay, this is loops. Keep running this until I is less than data.number is true. And each time I run, I'm going to add 1 to the I. Okay, so remember loops. Loops run until a certain condition is met. Okay, so where am I getting data.number? Well, data up here holds the whole JSON file. Okay, and if I take, if I come over here, I'm saying data.number. So data is this whole thing, dot number, that's going to return to me 6. So this is going to keep going until 6, well, I is less than 6 is no longer true. All right, so the first time it goes, it's going to say I is equal to 0. It's going to do its thing. It's going to add 1 to I. I will then be 1. 1 is still less than 6, so it'll keep going. So it's going to run basically for however many times there are people there. Okay, actually before this, I'm going to create an empty variable, an empty string variable called names, because that's basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to populate that with their names. So names plus equal, it's going to take whatever it's equal to and add on to it, and I'm going to add to it data.people. Okay, and then I got to give it an index number here, dot name, plus this /n. This /n is a JavaScript escape character for basically, this is basically the break tag, but in JavaScript. Okay, because if I use the actual break tag, this is saving it as text, so it actually wouldn't run it because this is in a canvas. Okay, this is inside the canvas tag. This isn't on a web page. This isn't on the actual HTML page. This is inside this canvas element. So if I did this, it would print it out as just a BR tag. It wouldn't run it as code. So this is the escape character in JavaScript for a new line. So I need to think, okay, what do I put here? Do I put 2, 3? What do I put? Well, I'm going to put I, right? Because when I is 0, I want it to go to data.people0.name. Okay, so data.people0, that's this first one, this first block, dot name, which is going to give us Alexander Masurkin, or however you say that. Okay, I becomes 1, it'll take us to this one. I becomes 2, it'll take us to this one, and 3 and 4 and 5. Okay. So the hardest part is just knowing how to navigate through this JSON file and grab exactly what you want. I want all of the people, I want all of their names. So I tell it to go to people, I tell it to go to 0, which is the first block here in this array, and then dot name, and that's going to give me Alexander. Okay. All right, let me see what this is doing. Okay, nothing yet. That's okay. So again, I'm just kind of getting it all set up. Now I want to write this onto the page, and P5 has a function for that, or a method called text. But I want to set up the text size first, so I'm going to say text size, then I'll say about 16. Okay, and then I can use the text method. Again, these are P5 commands. I'm going to say space station personnel. I think I spelled that right. Now, this text function expects some certain parameters. The first parameter is what it's going to type out, and then it needs to know exactly where to put it on the canvas. All right, so I'm going to say 20 on the X, 40 on the Y. All right, there we go. So 40 on the Y axis, 28 on the X. So 40 from the top, 20 from the left. Okay, now this is not dynamic data. This isn't going to change. This is never going to change. It's always going to say space station personnel. It's always going to say that. Now, the next thing I want to do is print out this, right? Whatever's stored inside of names, because I just populated names with all of the people on the space station. So I'm going to do that next. So now but I want this to be a little bit smaller. Now, because this runs line by line, it sets the text size to 16, prints it out, and then it's going to set the text size to 12 and then print out what I say here. All right, so I'm going to say text, print out what's inside of names. And I want this to be 40 from the left and 60 from the top. Okay, and there we go. So I think the I wouldn't even say hard, but the weirdest part about this is just knowing what P5 can do and getting used to it. You know, because this is basically the same as document.getElement by ID. You know, this is kind of what we've been doing before, right? Some ID dot enter HTML. Right, but the whole difference here is we're putting it out on a canvas element. Okay. Now, the one thing that I think is kind of weird that was actually happening to me before is I was getting some errors. It's kind of weird that it's not happening yet. But in the console, it would say something about cross-site scripting, or you know, you're not able to take a JSON file from another domain and get it to work and all that stuff. And so if you get that issue, P5 has a way to deal with that. And all you got to do is you come over here, you put a little comma, and you say JSON P. And that gives it the whole padding that we talked about last week. So that makes it so you can actually load it from a different domain, and you won't run into that issue. Yeah, I'm just going to put that on there just because either way it didn't break it. So basically what it comes down to is when you try to load that JSON file, if it doesn't work, throw it on here, that'll pad it, and then that'll make it so it should be okay. All right, so there we go. I looped through everything inside that JSON file and I got it in there. Now I get it. We could do that on an HTML file. There's really nothing really different here than what we could do anywhere else, but don't worry, we're going to get to the visual stuff here pretty soon. Okay, and you would use kind of a similar thing, like I could say text, there are currently then I can say data.number, right, because that tells me how many people. And then I want this to go down to the next line. Stationed at the ISS. Okay, and I want this to be 20 from the left, 210 or 220 from the top. I already played with all these numbers, so I kind of already am getting them where I want them to be. All right, so we can see that it's pulling that 6 from the JSON file right here, is data.number. So the cool thing about this is this is dynamic. If this JSON file ever changes, then all of this stuff will automatically update. Okay. This other thing I wanted to show, I guess, and I need to grab this. I'm trying to think if I want to do this. Yeah, I mean, there's something else you could do that I guess is kind of cool. So I'm going to copy this. Like, instead of saving this to a variable or something, I could actually loop through and I could draw things. So if we come to the reference here, and I come down here to, let's do ellipse, which is like a circle. You can draw an ellipse by just typing out ellipse and throwing in some numbers. If you're not sure what these numbers mean, you come down here and it tells you. So this first one is the x coordinate of the ellipse, the y coordinate of the ellipse, and the width and height. All right, so one thing you can kind of do, which is kind of cool, so I could say, all right, I want to draw an ellipse for however many people are on here. And the first one, it wants the x coordinate. Well, P5 has this cool little function called random. So I can say random width, random height, okay, so what that does is it takes the width of the canvas, right, which is 500, and then it gives me a random number within it. So these are both the keywords that P5 understands. It knows it generates a random number, and it's generated a random number somewhere in between 0 and 500. Okay, and that's going to be the x coordinate of this ellipse. Then the y coordinate is it's taking the height, which is 300, and it's going to generate a random number between 0 and 300, and that's going to be the y coordinate. Well, it still needs to know how big I want these circles to be, so I could say 32 width, 32 height. Now when I save that, now it's just randomly putting circles on there. And these represent however many people are on there. Now you can see that it'll still cut them off a little bit, so I could say like random width plus 16, or 32 I guess, because that's how tall and wide they're going to be. So to always keep them on there and not ever have them chopped off like that. I don't know, it's up to you. I'm just trying to show you the different stuff you can do, and really if you hop into this reference, man, there's a ton of stuff in here. Okay, so there's that, and again, this is in the setup, so it only runs once. And so like putting a loop in here in the function draw just wouldn't make sense, because you're putting a loop inside of a loop and things just doesn't work the way you would think. Okay, so now let's talk about what I'm going to put in here. This is where, this doesn't get too bad, but it gets, to get the animation to work the way you want it, I had to do some weird stuff. And of course, this is how I got it to work. Maybe you'll do something different. Either way, this is how it is. So I'm going to set the fill to 255. To be honest, I probably don't even have to do that because I kind of already did it here. But you'll see what I talk about, though, why putting stuff inside this loop is different. You'll see it here when we get into the square that I animate here. But anyways, I'm going to set that. The fill is going to be white. I want the stroke to be white. Okay, I'm going to create a rectangle and I'm going to position it 405 on the x-axis, 300 on the y. I want it to be right down there at the bottom. It's going to be 75 wide, and then I'm going to give it a variable for the height. The reason I'm giving it a variable for the height is because this is going to change, and as it changes, I want it to make it look like it's animating up. Okay, now because I'm using this variable h, I need to set it up. Okay, so I'm going to come over here in the setup, I'm going to say h is equal to 0. That's just setting it up as a number type variable, basically. Okay, so now h is 0, so it's going to have a height of 0, which means I'm not going to see it. But if I were to make this, 100, we don't see it. Let's see if we're getting an error. Nope. Just want to make sure I'm doing this right. I may or may not. Let me take a look at this real quick. Alrighty, so anyways, just playing around with this rectangle is kind of weird. It wasn't showing up. I got it to show up here. I had 405, which kind of brought it over here, and then I had, the problem here is I had 300. Well, what that does is it's here, but it's actually like drawn down, and I can't see it anymore. It's kind of off. So if I say 200, you can see that now it's there, but if I move it down 100, it goes down here, and it's there, it's just off, so I can't see it. And that's okay. So for now, because what I want it to do is I want it to draw up. It's just kind of, I'm going to have it animate up to how many people are on. And I'm going to have little notches here that represent people. Okay, so that'll be kind of the last thing that we do here. So I'm going to set that up. Now I'm going to define the stroke as red. Okay, and you can do stroke height. Nope, stroke weight. I'm going to have it be 3. And I'm going to have a ton of strokes here, or lines. Now, the way the line works is you have to give it a starting point and an ending point, and it'll draw a line in between those. So my starting point is going to be 500, 280. Okay, and then 480, 280. All right, and you can see it made a little notch right there. So the starting point was 500, 280. So all the way over here was 500, and then 280 was about 20 pixels from the bottom. So what I'm going to have is each 20 pixels is going to be worth a person. Okay, so it went out to 500, 280, which is right there, and then 480 by 280 is it kept it on the same Y plane, but it moved it over another 20 pixels. So this is 480. So what I want is just to have a bunch of lines that go up here, and that's going to represent kind of my graph that I'm going to create here. So I'm going to throw in another one, and all I got to do is just start subtracting 20 from all of these. Okay, so I got my next line. All right, so that's going to be 240. Again, doesn't matter to me how you represent this. I just know that I had this growing, and I'm like, you can't really tell what it means. All right, so we'll have 220. This is going to be 200, 200, 220. Okay, So that'll be worth 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, I know there's 6, so I'm going to need at least that many. And I'll go a couple over it. So this is going to be 180. This will be 160. All right, so those will be, people. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'll probably go one more. Why not? Let's go 2. So 40, 40, nope, 40, 20. Okay, and then 140, 120. So I got my marks. Then I'll have some text down here that says something like each mark is worth 1 person or something. And then anyways, I'm going to attach the number variable and have it grow basically depending on how many people are in there. So I'm good with that. So come over here. So now I have the location of it. Okay, and then I have, hold on, I'm just thinking here. Yep, I have the location and then I have the width and the height. Well, I want the height to grow. So I'm going to go over there and I'm going to give it that variable. And where I want this to start, I want it to start basically down here, which we know the height of the canvas is 300. So that's where I want it to start. So I'm going to have the location be 405, 300. Okay, and right now it's going to go away because we don't really know what H is. So if I'm not careful, it's going to yell at me about H. Actually, it probably already is. Let's take a look. Yeah, H is not defined. So I need to define it. So I'm going to come up here in the setup and I'm going to say H is equal to 0. Okay, and that went away. So you can see right there, that's where it's at. Okay, and that's where it's going to start growing from. That's interesting. So if I were to change it to like 200, yeah, we kind of see it up here. Okay, but that's where I want it to start. And what I want it to do is just, kind of grow depending on however many there are. Okay, so I just have to set up. I'm not going to do any for loops because remember this whole thing is a loop. Okay, so I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to do an if statement. So if H is greater than count, I haven't created count yet. I'm going to show you what I do with that. We're going to say H is going to go by 2. It's going to subtract 2 from itself a bunch of times per second. Now if I come up here and I'm going to say count is equal to data.number, so that's going to give me 6 times 20. Okay, the reason why I'm doing times 20 is because I want 20 pixels to represent one person. Then I want another 20 pixels to represent the next one and the next one. So that's 120 pixels, right? So there's 6 people times 20, that's 120, right? So this whole thing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this down is 120 pixels. So that's just how I was dividing them because I want this to grow for however many people there were. Each person is 20 pixels. So that's why I'm timesing it by 20. Okay, now here's the problem. It's working, but it's growing down. And because it's growing down, we can't see it. Because what's going on here is it goes, okay, count is going to be data dot, so 6 times, that's 120. So it's going to come over here, and it's going to say H is 0, right? So is 0 greater than 120? Well, no. So I guess actually it wasn't working at all. So is 0 greater than 120? It's not, so this just didn't even happen. So what I need to do is basically kind of reverse this. So if I times this by -1, what that does is now makes it -120. So yeah, 0 is greater than -120. So it's going to take the h, which is this, and it's going to do -2 to it. And well, when we're on the y plane like that, going negative is actually going up. Okay, so there we go. And depending on how fast you want this to go, you just put in, higher number. So if I put in 4 here, it'd go quicker. Okay, but this is all dependent on count, which is grabbing the data. So if another dude showed up and now there was 7, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, cool. And then maybe there was 8. It goes up even higher. So it's always going to be dependent on that thing that we pull from the JSON. So again, you just got to remember that this is getting ran, I don't know, whatever the frame rate is for P5, I don't know, maybe 24 or 30 times per second. I have no idea. But I wanted this back too because that's where I kind of liked it. But I kind of told you I'm going to show you kind of how you can know the difference between the looped stuff and the non-looped stuff. Like if I were to take this stroke, now we're going to take all this stuff and bring it over here. Okay, they'd get drawn, but you can see now that it covers it. This square covers it. So if I were to take this square and make it a little bit wider, well, it covers the line. Because what happens is this all gets set up once. Everything in this setup function all gets set up once, and then this keeps happening. So that's why it ends up getting in front of it. So this sets up once, this gets drawn over it, and then it just kind of goes over. So things that you want to be on top and to not get, to not disappear, you got to make sure that it's set up down here where it loops. And now they stay in front of this. So anyways, I think that's really all I had. There's another function that's kind of cool. It's mouse pressed. Again, another P5 function. Like I could basically say when someone clicks the canvas, make the background black. Well, everything disappears that was in setup because that only happens once. But the stuff that's looping, that doesn't go away. Because the minute I click, it loops again and then it just redraws it out. So it's kind of interesting to see that. But if you want to have some sort of interaction, you can have that as well. But I mean, also, this can give you all kinds of weird stuff. So I could say ellipse. Let's see. Mouse X, mouse Y. We'll make this 20 by 20. So now every time I click, it'll put an ellipse where I click. So, I mean, yeah, there's just all kinds of crazy stuff you can do. But anyways, I'm just going to comment that out because I don't want it to override all the stuff that I have there. I feel like I didn't do a very good job explaining the animation here. So I'm going to go through it one more time. If you got it and you understand it, great. That's basically all that I have for this. I think there was like an animation. Maybe there's all the mouse stuff. go to examples. I think that's actually what I was looking for. Yeah, if you want to see all the different stuff that you can do, check out these examples as well. Animation, this is actually what I kind of got here, and what I used to figure out how to do this is I just saw, okay, inside the draw, the y is going -1 every, however many times a second, and that makes it go up. And then if y is ever less than 0, it just sets it back to the height of the canvas. So the minute the y coordinate of this is less, because this is 0 up here on the y axis, the minute it's 0, it just goes back down there and sets the y equal to the height. So you can take a look at this. So I mean, really, again, what I have here is I've set up a variable called h for height, set it to 0, set up this variable called count, because I want each one of these guys, each number, to be worth 20 pixels. Okay. And then I times it by -1, so it would be -120. Because if I don't, then it doesn't even run. Okay, I set up the rectangle. I position it at 405 on the x, 300 on the y, make it 75 wide, and then the height is going to be whatever h is. Well, h is 0. So it starts out with the 0 height. Now remember, this stuff's being ran over and over again, so it starts to run this if statement, because I need it to animate, but I need it to stop at a certain point, right? So h is 0, and 0 is greater than -120, so it takes away 2 from h, which then runs all of this again, so now h is -2. So it goes, this is what, 300? So it goes up by -2 pixels, and the -2 pixels, -2 pixels, and it happens so quickly that it ends up looking like animation. All right, so it's -2, so is -2 still greater than -120? Yep, it is, so it goes to -4, which then updates the height, which then makes it -4. Goes up a little bit, and then it goes up a little bit, and it just keeps going until this hits. It's greater, so I guess once it's -122, right, it's now greater. That is no longer true, so this is false, and this whole thing breaks, and then it stops growing. So anyways, that's the best I can explain it. So if we come back here, again, so we need some sort of animation. Okay, so in my case, it's my little square here going up. Oh yeah, actually I am missing one last part, which really isn't huge, but text, then I have a little asterisk, each mark equals 1 person. And then I positioned this at 250, 290. So I have a little thing here just saying that, hey, each one of those marks equals 1 person. So they know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You usually need to have some sort of key on these. It helps. Anyways, let's go back here. So an animation with any part of the JSON data. Okay, so in my case, the animation was this growing. So you just need to have some sort of animation that represents the data in there. Print out on the page any part of the JSON data. Okay, that's what I did here. There are currently 6 people. I also printed out all that. Okay, loop through any of the parts. I looped through all of the names. Okay, and then I used a drawing to represent any of the JSON data. I mean, if you wanted to animate something that wasn't, maybe you wanted to animate the text, that's fine. It doesn't matter to me. Just the main part is I just want you to take this data, this JSON data, and visualize it somehow. So visually we can see what it is and how it's represented. Right, guys? Shouldn't be too bad. So this is, you only got a week to do this, but any questions, like usual, let me know. Good luck. We'll talk to you later.